Okay, happy Friday all. My name is Ariel, a little yoga flow for you. We're gonna start seated and then we'll get moving and grooving. Hopefully leave feeling better than we started. If you feel like you're gonna want blocks, I always feel like I'm on blocks. I actually didn't bring mine down, but I recommend having them. And if you know you wanna prop yourself up on something, grab either a pillow or a blanket, maybe a block to sit on, whatever you need. And then make your way down to a seated posture. Let your knees kind of open up. If you find that it's tough to get the knees down, prop yourself up, potentially even prop blocks underneath your knees to kind of settle down into this posture. And then find your comfy seat. Before you worry about finding length and height, just worry about finding your breath. Notice how you're feeling overall. Take a nice big inhale in through your nose to fill up the belly, to spread the ribs front and back, to lift the crown of the head up towards the ceiling, and then slowly exhale out through your nose. Take another inhale just the same, filling all the way up to the crown of the head. From the tailbone, feel almost your tailbone is your base and you're growing roots from the sits bones all the way down to the edges of your mat. And then slowly exhale out through your nose. This time, fill all the way up. Spreading the belly, the ribs, getting all the way full, and then take a nice sighing exhale out through your mouth. Notice if you are carrying some of the tension in through your shoulders and see if you could drop that tension down your back. Drop your chin down towards your chest, but keep the length through your entire spine. And then continue that kind of rolling of the chin into the upper back so that you can roll through your upper back and round the upper back and crawl yourself forward. Breathe into your upper back here. And then crawl your way over to the right, breathing into the left side body. Keeping your left sits bone nice and heavy to the floor. And then crawl your way over to the other side, to the left, and breathe into the right side body. And then make your way back to center, rise up nice and tall like there's a wall behind you. Find a slight back bend of the upper back so your shoulder blades are pressing your chest forward. You can use the connection of your hands on your knees to make that happen. And then this time, keep the length in your spine as you crawl your fingertips forward. Some of you might find that taking your hands back behind you is helpful and almost pinching the shoulder blades back behind you. Stay for an inhale and an exhale, and notice the outer glutes, especially on the side of a leg that's crossed in front. Don't worry, we'll even out our two sides. Lean back for a moment and switch the cross of the leg. Same thing, knees open, chest forward, shoulders back. And then from here, some way, somehow, you're gonna make yourself onto all fours. I'm gonna flip around. Some of you might flip over your legs. Whichever way works. We'll meet in a quadruped position or tabletop position. Hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath your hips. Find length to the crown of your head. Round the upper back and shoulders. Drop the tailbone down. Look towards your belly button and really let your head just kind of hang down. Look towards your knees. Inhale, gaze forward. Lift the gaze of the eyes, lift the chin, reach the tailbone up and back, and almost act as if you're pulling the heels of your hands towards your knees. And then start to move on your own breath. Maybe you move nice and slow like I am, or maybe you move a little bit faster, but let it match your breath. Use the inhale to pull forward. Wait for the exhale to drop the tail and round the upper back and lengthen the back of your neck. And maybe you start to sway side to side, moving in a way that makes sense to you in your body, right here, right now. And then from here, make your way back to neutral, tuck or untuck your toes behind you. Shift your hips towards your heels, walk your fingertips out in front, and really lengthen through the entire side of your waist, both sides of your waist. Really let your hips sink towards your heels and feel the whole back body lengthen. Maybe you sway a little bit side to side, just being curious about what that kind of adds to your little flow here. And then when you're ready, look towards the top of your mat. Send your hips over your knees, drop your forearms down. You'll kind of slither your way forward like a snake until eventually your knees come down, your hips come down, your chest pulls forward. Root down through your forearms and actively send your chest towards the top of your space, dropping your tailbone slightly just to protect the low back. Root through the forearms to lift your gaze. Maybe here as you root the floor away, you might even take your bottom teeth and pass your top teeth so you feel extra length in the front of your neck. You might feel funny, but don't worry about what it looks like. And you could keep that passing of the teeth, or you can come back to neutral. And then you're gonna open your eyes nice and wide and gaze over your right shoulder, kind of tracing the upper corner of your room, and then trace the right side of your room. And follow that gaze all the way down towards the floor, finding length in the left side of your neck. And then follow it all the way around so you make your way onto the right side of your neck as you gaze over to the left and up towards the ceiling. Once you make your way back to center, switch the directions. You gaze over the left shoulder, you find that space on the right side, and then down towards the floor, almost like you're tracing the room with your eyes. And it leads into some sort of, hopefully, a neck release. Next time you land with your gaze up towards the ceiling, take a moment to root down to the forearms and lift the chest. And then keep that rootedness and drop your chin down towards your chest. Let your head just hang. And then place your hands underneath your elbows so that you're into a low cobra, rolling the shoulders back, spreading the collarbones. Start to push the floor away, landing back into your child's pose. You can have the big toes touch. Have your knees be quite wide, lengthen through your whole back body. And eventually you'll make your way up to a tall kneel, and your hands will move back behind you. Fingertips turn out, send your chest forward, root down through your shins, and just open up your chest as you press down through the palms of your hands. Breathe into the space. And when you've had enough, you'll crawl your way back to a tabletop. Have your hands land about 2 inches in front of your shoulders. Tuck your toes, lift your knees, hips move up and back to a down dog. Take a little bit of time here to sway side to side, especially if this is one of the first movements of the day or movement practices of the day. Really take your time to ease into this first down dog. Spread the fingertips nice and wide, root down through every knuckle. Actively spin the crease of your elbow towards the top of your mat and firm your triceps in towards the midline. On your inhale, shift forward to plank. Shoulders just past the knees. Stay here for an inhale. As you do, press the floor away. Spread through the collarbones. Find length to the crown of the head and through the heels. And on your exhale, hips move up and back to down dog. Maybe there's a soft bend in your knees to find a little bit more length through your spine. Stay for a couple of inhales, a couple of exhales, letting your chest move towards your thighs. Beautiful. Once you feel satisfied, you'll take a big inhale. Let the inhale bring you into a plank. Drop the knees down, pull the chest forward, and then lower down to 90-degree bend in the elbows. You're gonna hover in chaturanga for an inhale, and then lower all the way down to the floor. If it's a little bit of a plop, that's okay. Just do your best to control. And then from here, you're gonna inhale, lift to low cobra, drop the tailbone, lift the belly button, spread the chest, and pinch the shoulder blades, pinch the elbows in towards the midline. Stay for an inhale, then drop your head down. You can even find a cheek if you wanted to, a cheek to the floor. And then bring your hands by your side, palms face your thighs. Roll the shoulders down and back. Reach your fingertips towards your toes, lift and hover. If it feels okay, then you might lift the legs off the floor, really trying to find length more than you find lift. Stay for an inhale. On your exhale, lower down, find the other cheek to the floor. Let everything soften. So you find this kind of moment of disengagement before we find the lift, the engagement of the upper back. Lift your chest off the floor. You're gonna keep the tops of your feet on the floor. Place your hands underneath your elbows. Root down to lift up into up dog. Kneecaps lift. Heart spreads to the top of your mat. Check in that your shoulders are right over your wrists. And then exhale, you're gonna flip up and over your toes into a down dog. Stay for a couple of breaths, just wiggling side to side, or maybe you find some stillness. Whatever makes you happy. And when you're ready, come down to the knees again, shift your hips towards your heels, find a moment of a long child's pose. And crawl your hands back behind you, hands down, chest forward, root down, and lift the collarbones, which will just kind of happen naturally as you root down through the hands. Stay for as many breaths as feel satisfying. I find that a lot of time in front of our screens, I've become more rounded, so just taking the moment to breathe into the chest, into the belly feels good. And then when you're ready, you can collapse a little bit through the chest just to make your way up and forward to your tabletop and into down dog. Tuck your toes, hips move up and back. We're gonna do that little sequence one more time through. It's an inhale into plank. Decide if you're gonna drop your knees or not. We're gonna pause at 90-degree bend in the elbows, chaturanga elbow, and then move all the way to the floor. Once you land, untuck your toes, lift your chest into a low cobra. Here you might check in and lift your hands off the floor just so you know that all of this work is coming from the upper back. And then you can place your hands by your side, lower a cheek down to the floor, take a load off for a moment, soften the upper shoulder, just kind of round forward. Wait for an inhale to lift up and off of the floor, fingertips reach towards your toes, send the elbows back towards each other, and maybe, just maybe the legs come up and off the floor. Totally optional. Stay for a couple of breaths. Make that one more. And when you're ready, roll on down to the ground. Other cheek comes down to the floor. Hands land underneath your elbows. Press down to lift up into up dog or low cobra, always an option. Notice if the heels start to splay out and think about pulling the heels in towards the midline. Exhale, hips move up and back to down dog. Pedaling out the feet, rocking side to side. And then find a moment of stillness. Last time through, we drop the knees down. Shift the hips towards the heels, child's pose. Crawl your way back. Find your hands behind your hips. Root down to lift up. For some of you, it might even feel nice to press down through the tops of the shins. I shouldn't say tops. Well, tops of the feet and the shins to lift your hips up. Stay there as long as feels interesting. When you're ready, the hips will come down. If they were elevated, your hands will crawl forward no matter where you were. Pull yourself up, tuck your toes, make your way back to a nice down dog. From your down dog, walk your feet slightly closer together so they're at least hip distance apart, maybe closer. Keep your left foot rooted, lift the right leg up towards the ceiling. Heel reaches up, inner thigh moves towards the ceiling, the right inner thigh. And think about closing off the right hip as you lift the left hip back towards the upper corner of your ceiling. Open up your hip. Just take a moment to explore the space in that right hip flexor. And on your exhale, send knee to chest. And then knee over to the left. Find a little cross the body. And inhale, sweep the leg right back up. And open up that hip one time. And then send your knee towards your chest one more time. Step your right foot next to right thumb. Step the back knee in an inch or two. Rise up to crescent lunge. From your crescent lunge, reach your fingertips behind you and launch yourself onto your right foot. Airplane pose. Pull the right hip back, send the left hip forward, passing through airplane into a tall standing position with your left knee moving towards your hip. Chest is forward, shoulders are back. Stay for an inhale. On your exhale, hinge at your hip again. Find your airplane pose. Almost like a warrior three, but your hands are behind you. Step back into your crescent lunge. Reach the arms up towards the ceiling. And then take your left foot down to the floor for a warrior two. As you land into your warrior two, almost think about the hips turning to the front of your mat and the chest turning to the side of your mat. As you do that, really check in with that right knee that's turning out. Arms are long and strong. Stay for an inhale. Lengthen out that right leg. Think about your hips staying as they are. Your torso is going to stay long from hip to armpit. Your hinging from the torso, from the hip, I should say. Your right hand's going to press into your shin or to a block on the pinky toe side of your foot and open up your chest. Notice if this bottom waist, if you can see yourself, if this bottom waist is really crunchy and rounded, see if A, you could lengthen, and maybe that means you have to come up an inch or two. And that's totally fine. Open up. Find that breath. If you want to gaze up, you could, but check in with your neck if it feels crunchy. Then feel free to gaze down to the floor. And then from here, bend back down into that long leg. So now you're almost into a side angle. You're going to cartwheel this top arm down to the floor. Turn towards the long side of your mat and bend into your left leg. My recommendation would be to turn your toes out. And I'm sorry, I'm not mirroring you. So do as I say, not as I do. Holding here into Skandasana, chest reaching forward, hips dropping as low as they can go. For me, that's not super low, and for you, it might be the same. Don't worry about that. Just check in with how you're feeling overall. Crawl your way back to the top of your mat with your right knee bent. Glue your left hand down. Open up to the right. Pulling your right hip back towards your left heel so that this right hip doesn't kind of get sassy off the side. Rather, it pins in towards the midline. And then from here, take your hand down to the floor. Step back to a nice tall plank. Stay for an inhale. Hips move up and back to a down dog. Taking a couple of breaths. Maybe a child's pose is calling your name. If that's the case, you definitely listen. And you stay in whatever posture you're in for as long as feels good. When you are ready for down dog, if you're not already there, come on back. We'll even out our two sides. It's the left leg that comes up. First, find the squaring of the hips. Pull the right hip back. Send the left hip forward. Lift that left leg any bit higher. And then open up your hip. See if you can keep your chest closed off to the floor. Exhale, send knee to chest. and then knee over to the right side, finding a little bit of rotation. Moving back to center, hips move up and back, three-legged dog, and then open up that hip. Ooh, maybe circle out the ankle. Got a couple snap, crackle, pops there for me. And then exhale, send knee to chest and plant that foot next to left thumb. Bend your back knee a little bit. Usually stepping in is helpful. Inhale, find your balance. Rise up into a crescent lunge. Breathing, finding space through the chest. And then reaching your fingertips forward, lengthen out your back leg. I almost forgot where we went. And then we're gonna rise into an airplane pose. Take your hands by your side. Pinch the shoulder blades back. Find your right hip turning down, your left hip pulling back. Then from here, you're gonna rise all the way up. Bring the right knee through. See if you can balance. And drop the tailbone down. Send the left hip flexor forward. That will be helpful. Arms will come up. And then exhale, sweep the arms back behind you, sweep the leg back behind you, moving through an airplane pose. And then down to a crescent lunge, see if you can balance, stick that landing. A wobble is okay, it's only normal. And then open up to warrior two. Same thing as before. You want your front heel intersecting with your back inner arch. Really press the pinky toe side of that right foot. Pull the left hip back and send the right hip forward. So you're almost squaring your hips in theory to the top of your mat. You won't be fully able to do that, anatomically speaking. And then your chest is gonna turn towards the long side of your mat. Stay here. And then root down to rise up into a nice straight front leg. Hands might come to the hips. Firm that outer hip in, hinging at your hips. So think about finding length from sternum to belly button as you hinge, hinge, hinge. Eventually, you'll find your hand to either shin or block on the pinky toe side. Send your bottom ribs over to the right and your top ribs back behind you. And notice if you're cinching that bottom waist. See if you can find a little bit of length from armpit to hip. And then from here, we're gonna bend into more of a side angle. Bend that bottom leg into back to warrior two leg. Reach that top arm to the upper corner of your room and circle your hand down to the floor, shifting your weight over to the right side into your Skandasana lunge. Turn your right toes out. Chest reaching forward, just being curious about the space you can create. And from here, crawl your way back to that left leg, bending that left leg to about 90 degrees, rooting the right hand underneath your right shoulder, pulling that left hip back, and gaze up to that left hand. Stay for an inhale and an exhale. When you're ready, plant the hand down, step back to a tall plank. Stay here, just feel the sturdiness, the strength. If you need to drop your knees, you drop your knees. And when you're ready, use an exhale to lift your hips up and back. If child's pose is calling your name, please listen anytime. But wherever you have landed, check in with your breath. Notice if your mind has wandered. See if you could come back to the here, to the now, to the breath. If you're in child's pose, start to make your way back. And from down dog, we'll take a big lift of the right leg. Open up that hip, exaggerate that. Send the knee towards the chest and then cross the midline. So right knee over to left elbow. Lengthen out that right leg underneath you. So it's on the left side of your mat. Root the right hand down. Keep both hips lifted and reach the left arm up towards the ceiling. Fall in triangle. So now we did a triangle. Now you can do the side plank version of it. Stay for an inhale. Then plant your left hand down. Step back to your plank. Hips move up and back to down dog. Lift that left leg up, same thing, open up the hip. Exhale, send knee to chest and cross the midline, left knee to right elbow, left leg long, root the left hand down, open up. Keep the hips lifted, exaggerate the opening of the chest. And when you're ready, take your right hand down, step back to a plank, and lower all the way down to the floor. If you need to drop the knees, you drop the knees. Once you're on the floor, take your hands down by your side and let your head just kind of roll down to one side. And again, soften through that low back. Let your shoulders do what they need to do, which is usually just round forward. And then from here, you have the option to either take your hands back behind you, or maybe you clasp your hands back behind you and send your knuckles back to the wall behind you. Lift the chest. Lengthen through the crown of the head. Try not to gaze too far forward because then you'll crank the neck. And from here, think about lifting through the crown of the head and through the chest. Maybe you lift the legs off of the floor, same option as before. Stay here for an inhale or two. And when you're ready, keep your legs lifted, but plant your hands by your lowest rib, elbows over wrists, and then push yourself up into an up dog. Top of the feet come down. Hips move up and back to down dog. Inhale, right leg up. Exhale, knee to chest. Hover for a moment. Plant the right foot next to right thumb. Step the back foot in an inch or two, back to crescent lunge. Same thing as before. Reach the fingertips back behind you, crown of the head to the top of your room. Land onto that right leg. Find your balance into airplane pose. Rise up, send the right toes down, the heel down, lift the left knee in front of the hip. Cross that leg over the right knee, above the right knee. And then sit your hips down and back into a figure four chair type pose. Flex the left toes towards your shin. Sit the hips back towards your heels. And then maybe you place your hands on your hips and just notice if there's one hip that tends to be higher than the other. And see if you could manually adjust those hips so that they're parallel to the wall behind you and parallel to the floor below you. Stay for one more inhale. And as you rise up, try to find that balance on the right foot again, knee in front of your hip. Step back into your crescent lunge. Rise up into crescent lunge. Lengthen out your front leg. You can keep the back heel lifted, totally fine. Pull the right hip back as you send the chest forward. Keep a nice long spine. And then check in with your hips again. Pull the right back hip again. Send the left hip forward. Find length for the whole spine. And then you'll pause where you find a nice flat back. For some of you, it might be good to put your hands on blocks. Some of you might be able to reach the floor. But if you reach the floor at the expense of your back, meaning it's rounded, it's just not worth it. So find the happy medium. And then once you found it, then you can melt over your thigh. Let your head hang nice and heavy. Keep the right hip pulling back. And then you're gonna bend back down into that right leg. Maybe step the back foot back an inch or two. Left hand roots down again, open up to the right. We're gonna step the right foot back into a side plank. You get to decide whether it's staggered or stacked, or if the bottom knee is lifted or lowered, Say for an inhale. On your exhale, plant your hand down. Hips move up and back to down dog. Recenter. Smooth out your breath. Get ready for that left side. It lifts up. Exhale, send knee to chest. Plant the left foot next to left thumb. Step the right knee in an inch or two. Rise up. Keeping a good bend in that right knee to send your hip flexor forward. And then from here, your fingertips move back behind you, hinging at your hips, launching yourself up onto your left leg. Find airplane pose, left hip back. Right hip forward. Rise up so the right knee is in front of the right hip. And then stack that foot on top of your thigh and shift your hips back. Oop, towards your heels. Balance, it's all part of the process. And again, as you hold here, place your hands On your hips, do you need to adjust to become parallel to the floor? Maybe, maybe not. Stay for as long as feels interesting, and when you're ready, rise up with control. Knee lands in front of the hip first. We're gonna move through airplane, and then step it back into crescent lunge. Rise those arms up. Hands to your hips, lengthen out your front leg and your back leg. Pull the left hip back as you send the chest forward. Plank type pose in the torso. Folding, folding, keeping length through your whole spine. Eventually you'll find a spot where your hands can come down to floor or blocks. Once you've found that, stay for an inhale. Wait for an exhale to come around before you melt over that front thigh. Let that head hang heavy to find length at the back of the neck. And from here, bend into that front leg. Step that back foot back another inch. Root down to the right hand. Shift your weight over onto the outer edge of your pinky toe on that right side. And land into a side plank. Nice proud chest, nice big inhale. When you're ready, take that top hand down to the floor. Rotate onto your tall plank. And lower your way back down to the floor. With control. Ooh, baby. Once you land, keep your hands as they are. Big inhale, lift the chest. Root down through the hands, through the feet, up dog. And hips move up and back to down dog. One more little standing sequence before we make our way down to the floor. We're gonna tiptoe our way to the top of our mats. Tiny little steps, take as many as you need to get to the top of your mat. Landing in a forward fold, heel toe your feet a little bit wider, about hip distance apart, maybe a little wider than that if you'd like. Slightly bend the knees and just fold in half. Let your thighs be there for support, which means you might need to bend your knees a lot. Hang your head, and then grab opposite hand to opposite arm, maybe up your arms so much that your arms are there to support your head as you hang. And maybe it feels good to sway side to side. And when you've had enough, plant your hands down to floor or shins. We want to inhale to halfway lift. Exhale to forward fold. Heel toe your feet a little closer together. Let your hips come down, your chest move forward, your arms reach up and overhead. Stay here in Utkatasana chair pose for a beat before exhale, folding in half. Take your left foot back behind you. Drop the left heel down. Shimmy the right foot out a little bit wider, I should say. So you're more on train tracks than tightrope. And then rise up to warrior one. Here we think definitely about pulling the right hip back and sending the left hip forward. Rib tip connection, arms reach up. Maybe you find a slight back bend of the upper back. Take your hands back behind you, make fists behind you, and then hinge at your hips. Pull the right hip back as you send the chest forward. Let the right shoulder rest on your right thigh, and let your head hang down. From here, you're gonna open up into warrior two. Cartwheel your arms up and over. You have to adjust the feet just a little bit. From here, we're gonna land onto that right foot. Step your left foot in an inch or two. And then landing onto that right foot, you're gonna rise up and hinge at your hip into half moon. A block will be helpful if you have it, no stress if you don't. Flex your left toes towards your shin. And just like we had done in our side angle or triangle, think about your bottom waist rotating to the side of your mat and your top ribs rotating back behind you. Maybe you gaze up to that top hand. And maybe not. Stay for another inhale. On your exhale, step back to your warrior two. And then cartwheel your hands down to the floor. Step your back foot in to meet your front foot, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. One more time, inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. And then drop the hips down, lift the chest, Utkatasana chair pose, starting everything on the other side. Stay here for an inhale. Exhale, fold in half. Step your right foot back behind you. A little bit more on train track, so wider than you think you should go. Roll that right heel down. Pull the left hip back even before you stand up. And here you are in warrior one. 90-degree bend in that front leg. Find a little bit of back bend in your chest. And then from here, bring your hands back behind you, making fists, pulling that left hip back as you send the torso towards that front thigh. Your left shoulder is gonna rest on that left thigh. Stay here for an inhale, let your head just kind of drop. And then rising back up to warrior one, cartwheel your arms around to warrior two. Here we want to think about almost squaring the hips to the front of your mat and your chest opening to the right side of your mat. Step that back foot in an inch or two. And then land onto that front foot. Top hip on top of your bottom hip. Fingertips reach towards the floor, right toes flex towards your shin. Think of, again, about that bottom waist moving to the right side of your mat. The top waist rolling back, opening up the chest. And once you've had enough, carefully, control it, bend that front leg, find your balance. And cartwheel open to warrior two. And then cartwheel open or down to the floor. Step the right foot to meet the left foot. Forward fold. Heel toe your feet out, so toes turn out. Heels come down, hips come down, chest moves forward into Malasana Yogi Squat. Inhale to find length through your whole spine. And exhale, fold in half. Root your hands down, step back to a plank. Hips move up and back to down dog. Lift the right leg up towards the sky. Send knee towards chest and plant that right knee next or behind your right wrist. Shift your hips all the way back, finding your version of your pigeon pose. If your right hip is really far from the floor, feel free to pad up that hip with a pillow or a block. And then feel free here to melt yourself down closer to your thigh. If the forehead is far from the floor, like it is for me, a block or just stacking your fists is perfect here. And before you get too comfy, start to notice if your shoulders come up and eat your neck, and see if you could drop the shoulders down the back. Check in with your back leg and make sure it's right in line with your hip and that it's reaching as far back as it can go. And then feel free to hang out here as long as you'd like, softening through the breath, softening through the jaw, noticing any other points of tension. My recommendation would be to take that exhale and start by noticing your toes. Then notice your ankle. Notice your knee and your hip. And see if each breath can bring you deeper into this release. And if this is the side that you need a little time, a little love, you stay. When you're ready, you'll plant your hands down. You'll step back to either tabletop or a three-legged dog, moving in a way that makes sense for you. If you kind of have a practice of what you like to do on one side to kind of create the space and reset, then you go for it. But whenever you're ready, You'll take the left leg up. You'll step the left knee to the back of your left wrist. You'll shimmy your weight back. And know that if you have, I should have said this on the other side, but if there's any tension in the knee or pain at all, feel free to ditch it entirely and go for a figure 4 on your back. But here you're on your left side. If it feels okay, you can pad up this hip with a pillow or a block. You can start to melt your way down. Check in with the right leg. Make sure that it's in line with your hip. And then maybe you stack the fists. Drop the head on top, lengthen the back of the neck. Take a big inhale through your nose. A soft exhale through the nose. And do that same full body scan. This time maybe you start at the top of the head. Notice if your ears are pulling back and see if you could let that go. Your neck is strained, or your shoulders are tense. Start to soften those areas. And same thing with this side. If this is the one you need that time, that love, you stay. When you're done, if you'd like to release by bringing that leg back, you could. If you're like, I can stay close to the ground, then just drop your hip down and swivel the right leg in front and land in a seated position. If you did go through down dog somehow, some way, meet me here in a seated position, no rush. Hands can land on your shins. Inhale, chest forward. And then round through your spine. Lead with the low back. Reach your fingertips forward and start to articulate through your spine, gradually lowering down to the floor so the head is the last thing to land. Palms face up. Heels land close to the glutes. And then actually what could be nice is walk your feet as wide as your mat and let your knees just drop together. And soften through not only the low back, but the belly and the shoulders. Palms face up, and notice if there's any bit more room for space in the back body. I'd recommend planting the back of your head down to lift the shoulder blades up and then reset, and then feel that extra bit of space you create in the front of the chest. If you're craving a little twist, then let your knees drop over to the left. Let your gaze drop over to the right. Maybe you take your arms to a T. Let your knees then come over to the right. Let your gaze move over to the left. Make your way back through the center. Walk your feet a little bit closer. Drop your tailbone down to flatten out your low back. Press through the whole foot and lift your hips up and off of the floor, rolling through your spine. Maybe bring your hands down by your side to assist in that lift. Staying at the top for an inhale. And then melting your way back down on your exhale. If you're craving any last movements, whether it's happy baby or maybe a butterfly or anything in between, now is your time to move through those postures. And when you're ready, you'll take your legs nice and long, as wide as your mat. Palms facing up. Take that inhale just as we did at the beginning of class, all the way through the ribs, front and back, to the belly, up to the collarbone, and then exhale, slowly release that breath out. And rest. Shavasana. I encourage you all to stay here in your final resting pose for as long as time allows. When your body gets restless, see if you could stay for another minute or two. And then you'll gradually make your way up to a seated position and carry on the rest of your evening. See you all next week. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Namaste.